We are taking start with Microsoft SQL Server from scratch. I'll be your trainer. The things that we are going to cover in this is from everything from scratch, like what is our DBMS, primary key, unique key, data types, foreign key, then database design techniques. So this is important thing, database design techniques. Normally you won't get this in any SQL Server training. So this is important. If you move to some architecturing level, then it will be very much beneficial, and if you are working as a freelancer, even then it will be beneficial. You need to understand the requirement, then you need to know what are the tables that we need to design for this kind of application. So this we are going to cover here. Then we'll see T-SQL, like select queries, joins, subqueries, correlated queries, so functions, views, transactions, and we'll also see some admin tasks like taking backups and restoring that, generating scripts, and all basic admin tasks. So this is not SQL Server administration course. This is SQL Server developer course. So you should be in a position to write any query to extract the data from any kind of database. So that is our main intention behind this. So you should be in a position to write queries, especially select query. So finally, I'm going to give you assignment as well by the end of this course or by the end of few sections. So wherever I find necessary, I'll be giving you some assignments so that you can have your hands on the assignment. So at the end, we'll have a QA session as well. So prerequisite for this, you should know how to use a computer and you should have SQL Server installed. I hope all you might have installed SQL Server 17. So these are the operating system requirements for this, and processor, RAM, and hard disk space, and all those things. One point you should remember, you should disable prevent saving changes that requires table recreation. Now, what is the use of this setting? Once we go for creating tables, at that time I will show you. Normally we create a table, we save the table. Now we thought of adding one more column. Then I have added another column. Now after adding another column, if I try to save the table, it will not allow me to do that because of this setting. It will prevent save changes that requires table recreation. Why do I need RDBMS? That is my first question. In our traditional approach, we used to store information in the flat files, like your text file or some files with certain format. Like if I want to store the record of an employee, then I used to say employee ID, employee name, then salary, then the next record I'll use hash, the symbol hash. If I say hash, then next record starts. Then I write employee ID, employee name, salary, then hash. So we use some standards or procedures for every project, which is different. So I store information in file using certain approaches. Now what happens, this data is, or this database file is tightly coupled with the application that we write to read this data. That means my application I have written with hash symbol as record separator. Now if I want to use this database file with some other application, I cannot do this. I need to make changes in my database file, or I need to make changes in my application, or even after making many changes, it was not possible for this database file to be accessed by some other application. That is a major thing. So what we thought of, let us have our database logically in the form of tables. Physically it will be again into flat files, but logically we are trying to store it in the form of tables. In this way, employee ID, employee name, gender, and email. So this table is called as relation. This table is called as relation. In our SQL Server or database world, table is called as relation. Whatever may be the technology, whether it is SQL Server or Oracle or DB2 or anything, MySQL, whatever it may be, a table means relation. So we are logically storing the data in the form of rows and columns. Columns are called as attributes or fields. So I have 4 attributes: employee ID, employee name, gender, email. Or I can say 4 fields. And rows are nothing but your records, or we also call it as tuples. So it was first published by EF code in 1970. Little history. A relational database consists of collection of tables. A table consists of rows and columns. Each row represents a record. Each column represents an attribute of the record contained in the table. So Microsoft SQL Server, Oracle, DB2, MySQL, these are all your RDBMS tools. We interact through our database using SQL. This point is important, the last point. Now, if we go back to our earlier data access technologies prior to this SQL, we were using file handling functions. So in C we have fopen, fclose. So we open a file, we read the file, then we close the file. Now if I change my programming language from C to C++, then I need to learn again new file handling functions. If I change to Java, then again I need to learn new file handling functions. That was the big problem. So what we thought, instead of this, let us introduce an intermediator between our database and application, an intermediator language. So that is structured query language. Now I'll be telling to database to get the record in the form of structured query language. Say select star from employee table. Now it is the job of the select star from employee table or your RDBMS, that is Microsoft SQL Server, to open the file, read the records, return the records, close the files. So we need not to do all these things. We need to just say a single statement. So this is very important. Now a Java application can use SQL to interact with my database. They need not to go for their file handling function. So my PHP application can use SQL to interact with my application. Now say I have a table with employee ID, employee name, gender, email and contact number. Now my first question is, the information that I have in my table, is it valid or there is some kind of ambiguity in this? So this looks good. So that means the information in the table is valid. I have 5 employees with employee ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's fine. Their name, Ahmad, Peter, Lily, Tom. Okay, Tom, I have twice, Tom. So I can have 2 employees with same name, there is no issue in it. But if you see their email ID, it is different, that's fine. So information looks good. Now I want you to tell me attribute or a column using which I can identify a row uniquely. As per this requirement, we have 2 columns using which I can identify a row uniquely. Employee ID and email. So we have employee ID and email. If I say employee with email ahmad@gmail.com, so I'll get a unique record. If I say employee with employee ID 3, I get a unique record. So I have 2 columns using which I can identify a row uniquely. So I call these 2 columns as candidate key. I call these 2 columns as candidate key. So employee ID is candidate key, employee email is candidate key. But I need to choose one. I need to choose any one column for my use, for my application use. So I need to decide on, so what column should I choose? It is better to choose employee ID. If your application is purely depending upon emails, like you are making an application for bulk email sending and kind of newsletters and all those things, in that scenario you can choose email as your primary key. But it is good to choose employee ID as primary key in this scenario. So employee ID I'll choose to identify a row uniquely. So I called employee ID as primary key. So what is primary key? Primary key is an attribute or a column using which I can identify a row uniquely. Now there are 2 things that you need to remember about primary key. Now can I have 2 employees with same employee ID? Is it possible? In an organization, 2 employees with same employee ID? No. So my primary key value should not repeat. I cannot have duplicate values in my primary key. That is the first rule. And the second rule, my employee ID cannot be null. So I cannot have any employee with no employee ID. I cannot say that this is employee of my organization and it does not have any employee ID. A candidate is joining an organization, then the first thing that they'll get is an employee ID. So 2 rules that we need to remember about primary key is primary key cannot be null and primary key values cannot be repeated, or we cannot have duplicate values. Now, one more thing, that is our contact. As per my requirement, application requirement, I want to make sure that contact number should not repeat. Even contact number should be unique. What I can do, I cannot make two primary keys on a single table, but I can make contact number as unique key. I can make contact number as unique key. Now, the difference between primary key and unique key is that unique key can have a single null value, that's it. Again, I cannot repeat values in unique key. I cannot repeat null values in unique key. A unique key can have a single null value. So I can make this column as unique and I can have a single null value. The difference between primary key and unique key is that primary key will not have even a single null value, whereas unique key can have a single null value. And even in primary key, you cannot have duplicates. Even same in unique key, you cannot have duplicates. And on a table, you can create a single primary key, whereas on a table, you can create multiple unique keys. I can make contact number as unique. I can make email as unique. I can make any column as unique if you want. So primary key versus unique key. So primary key, it cannot be null. It cannot have duplicate values. A table can have one and only one primary key. Unique key, it can have one and only one null value. It cannot have duplicate values. A table can have more than one unique key. So this is the basic difference. In a lot of interviews they ask, and we need to understand while designing the database. Next, I have a table where I have student ID, subject ID and marks. Student 1, in subject 101, he got 67 marks. And student 1, in subject 102, okay, yes, one student can have multiple subjects. That means this information is correct. This data is valid. If this data is valid, then what will be the primary key? If I want to make a primary key using single column, I cannot do that. Student ID 1, if I say, I'll get 3 records. Subject ID 101, I'll say I get 3 records. Mark 67, I don't know how many records I get because there can be all students who got 67 marks. So using single column, I cannot do. But if I say student ID plus subject ID, if I say student 1 and subject 101, I get a unique record. I do not have 101 repeated anywhere. If I say student 2 103, I'll get a unique record. So in some scenarios, it is not possible to create a primary key using a single column. Then we should think of combining two columns to create a primary key. So these kind of primary keys are called as composite primary key, where you have multiple columns. Now, 101 cannot be repeated. In this scenario, I cannot have another record as 101 as per this table. So a composite primary key is a primary key which contains multiple columns, and rest of the rules applies same. It cannot have null values and values cannot be duplicated. So now without wasting much time on theory, because it was important to discuss all those theory, but I'm very much interested in showing the things practically. So we'll get started with SQL Server. We'll see how to create database, how to create table, how to create primary key. We'll also see how to set identity column. Now what is identity column? Say I want to make some column as auto generated and auto incremented. Say employee ID, I want to set it as auto incremented column. So it will start with 1 and it will generate the value automatically. If I insert another record, then it will increment the value and make it 2. So that will happen automatically. I need not to worry about ID, it will generate automatically. But in your real-time project, it is not best practice to give employee ID as auto-generated. Then what should I give as auto-generated? We'll see that later on. But employee ID, department ID, so these are the main things. So you need not to set it as auto-generated or identity column. But here to understand the concept, we'll see this. Then we'll also see set default values. Default values in the sense, say for example, if I do not give any value for a column, it should take some value. So I'll set some default value. So we'll see how to set default values. If I do not give any value for a column, by default it should take, if it is a flag, then it should take true, or by default it should take false. So that kind of things we need in our projects. Then we'll also see how to create unique key. primary key and unique key. We have seen both the things. So we'll see how to create primary key. We'll see how to create unique key. We'll also see how to create check constraints. Now what are check constraints? I can say that, if I have a salary column, I can say that the value of this column cannot be negative. So it should not be less than 0. So I can give that kind of restriction as well. So that is called as your check constraints. Or you can say a validation on a column. So that is your check constraint. Basically, in our database or in our real-time projects, we do not create check constraints on the table columns. Why? Because it becomes difficult for another programmer to understand. So you have created the database and you have created the check constraints. So because of not good documentation, another programmer, they do not know there are some check constraints and they may get some trouble, they may get into trouble. So all these kind of check constraints or validations we handle in our programming, that is in our C# or in our UI. So we handle there. But anyway, we'll just try to understand that as well. Finally, we'll also try to take a look into log file, and what is log file. We'll see how things, which is not very much important, but we'll see log files. So let us see a demo. Now let us start. So I'll just go for start and I'll say SQL. So I'll get SQL Server Management Studio 17. So I have pinned it to the taskbar. So just you can right click on this and say pin it to the taskbar. So unpin from taskbar. It has removed from the taskbar. I can right click on this and say pin it to the taskbar. So you get it on the taskbar. So I can arrange it wherever I want. So we frequently use these things. So I have pinned it to the taskbar. So I'll click on this SQL Server. If you have installed the SQL Server for the first time, and if you are starting it for the first time, it will take a little time. Server type is your database engine. Server name. This is basically your system name, or at the time of installation, whatever you have given the server name, or your computer, your computer name. So if you do not remember this server name, one thing you can do, just click on this drop down list and you can go for browse more. In database, like local servers, in database engines, you will find your server name here. There might be this as your server name, or might be /SQL Express. So whatever is installed on your system, it will display here. So this is the best approach. For the first time, if you are trying to access, just follow this approach. Server name, you select it from here. I'll say OK. And authentication, at the time of installation, you might have given SQL Server authentication, or you might have given your Windows authentication. So better choose Windows authentication. Now I'll say connect. Now it has connected to the server. You have a lot of folders here: databases, security, server objects, replication. So you need not to worry about all these folders. We are going to worry much about databases folder. All our databases will be in this databases folder. And this is your Object Explorer window. This window is important. If I lose this window, then I can get it from View, Object Explorer. If I want to pin this window at some other location, so I can click on this yellow area, I can drag it. Now you get a lot of icons. So I'll take my mouse pointer on the right pinning icon. So I have pinned to the right. Now you see this. Auto hide is off. If I unpin this, auto hide is on. Now if I take my mouse pointer and click, it will show me. If I remove my mouse pointer, it will automatically hide. So anyway, let me pin it to the left. So this is the best location for me to work. So this Object Explorer window is very important, because we will be working with Object Explorer window. Now databases, I'll explore this databases folder. So you have lot of databases: Ajax, SQLDB, BankDB, and lot of the things. There is another folder here, that is system databases. So we should not touch this system databases folder, because here you will have a default databases, that is master, model, MSDB, TempDB. So the information about all these databases will be stored in this master database that is created by your Microsoft SQL Server. So we have all these databases. Now I want to create my database. I'll just right click on the databases folder and I'll say new database. So if I want to create my databases, go to databases folder, select databases folder, and then right click on databases folder and say new database. Now you get a window that is new database window. I can give database name. So my database name is my org August 6th, or you can say 6th August. Whenever I create a database, you see that it is going to create two files. One is a database file where your actual data will be stored, and another is log file where the information about the entries that we are doing or the information about the operation that we are doing on the database will be stored in the log file, and actual data will be stored in the database file. So rows and logs. And initial size is 8 MB. You see this. This is also important point, that is your initial size. Because now I'm creating the database, it does not have any data. So what should be the size initially I want to give it so that it can occupy that size on my hard disk. So I can give it in MBs. So here it is 8 MB and log file also 8 MB. Now initial size is 8 MB and slowly we started inserting data into the database, and what we have seen, 8 MB is full. Then what should happen? Then auto growth, it should be automatically grown by 64 MBs. If 8 MB is full, then it will become 8 plus 64, that is 72, or 72 MB. And till where? Unlimited. That means till your hard disk is full, it will keep on growing. But if you want to limit this, you have settings over here. In this you have a setting that is enable auto growth. If I uncheck this, I say okay, then auto grow is disabled. Now after 8 MB it will not allow you to grow. Basically this is what happens on the servers that they allocate to the users. So your database server, and we are going to give you 100 MB of space or 2 GB of space on our server. So this is how for database server. So this is how they allocate. But if you say auto growth, file growth, and maximum file size. So I say grow in MBs, so 64 MB, and unlimited, grow to unlimited. Second option is grow in MBs and limit it to 1000 MB. So it will grow in a 64 MB, but maximum it will reach to 1000 MB. That restriction we have given here. The other option of growth is in percentage. Increment it by 10% and move unlimited or move to max of 1000 MB. So I'll set as default. So auto growth and maximum size. So auto growth we have two options, that is grow by percentage and grow by MBs. And maximum size we have two options. We can define a maximum size, or maximum size can be unlimited. Unlimited means it can use the complete hard disk. And the location where we are storing these files are SQL and program and all these things. So that's it. This is all the information about your database at the time of creation. So I'll say okay. I have created my database. Now I'll explore this. In database again we have lot of folders: database diagram, tables, views, external resources, synonyms, programmability, and service broker, storage, security. So we need not to worry about all the folders as of now. We need to just worry about tables folder, because I want to create tables. So I'll explore this. Again here you have system tables, file tables, external tables, graph. So don't worry about all these things. Just select the tables folder, right click and say table. So it will be creating a new table. So hope you are getting. This is our server, databases folder, right click and say new database. It will create a database. Now we created this database. Now explore the database, lot of folders, then select tables folder, right click and say table. Now you can create a table. Now before we proceed for creating table, I want to show you one default setting that I told you. Tools, options, and on the left you have designers. Prevent saving changes that requires table recreation. So by default it will be checked. I'll say okay. So this is your default setting. Now let us see what will be the problem with default setting. I'll just right click on the table and say table and column employee empid employee ID, and I want it to be of type integer so that I can store numbers. So integer is number. Allow null. No, I don't want to allow null values. emp name, and I want it to be of type string, so it will be varchar, and its maximum number of characters can be 50. That's it. And allow null. No, I don't want to allow null. Now let me save the table. I'll click on save icon. It will ask me the name of the table. Now as per the current industry standards, your table name should be a singular object name. That means employee. That's it. Earlier we used to use some prefixes, that is TBL underscore and all those things. No, don't do that. Give singular form of object name, that is employee. So I'm going to store the information about employees. Now this will be helpful in our entity framework once we start working with that. So I'll say okay. Now I have created the table. Now I haven't created primary key. So employee ID, I want to make primary key. I can select employee ID, right click, everything is on right click, you see this. I'll say set primary key. Now I'll say save. You see that there is a star, means I haven't saved the table yet. Now I'll say save. Table got saved. Now I'll add another column. Email. Again varchar 50. I'll say does not allow null. Now I'll say save. Now you have an error. See that saving changes is not permitted. The changes you have made require the following table to be dropped and recreated. So normally this is the problem you get. So now I'll go for tools, options. I'll uncheck this. I'll say okay. Now I'll say save. So it has got saved successfully. We have saved this table. That means we have created the table. Now it should be available in our tables folder. I'll explore this. So it is not available. So what do I need to do? I'll just right click and I'll say refresh. Now you see the table you got. So if you do not refresh the table folder, you cannot find it here. Now I got my table. So employee ID, I want to make it an identity column that is auto generated or auto incremented. So I'll select employee ID. I'll scroll into the properties window. Right click, I can say properties. So you get the properties window here, or on the bottom also you have properties window. Now I'll scroll down and you see identity specification. I'll explore this. If identity is no, I need to make it yes, and it will say seed as 1 and increment by 1. So start from 1, increment by 1. Now do remember that you should select employee ID column. If you select employee name column and if you try to do this, this is disabled, you see this. Why? Because it is not of type integer. This is only for integer types. This is enabled. Now I'll save this. That's fine. Now I'll add one more column, gender, varchar. I'll not say allow null. Now I'll save this. Now I'll select gender column and I want to set some default value. You can see that default value or binding. I can do that here. I'll say male as the default value. I'll save this. Email, I want to make it unique. So I can select email. I'll right click and I'll say indexes and keys. Earlier I have said primary key. Now I'll go for indexes, keys. So already we have primary key. I need to add one more. That is this. You can give some name. Unique underscore email. So column name I need to select from here. Email. I'll say okay. Is unique? I'll say yes. And I'll say close. And I'll say save. That means now my email address is unique. I have applied unique key on my email address. Finally, I'll add one more column, salary, and salary is of type float. That means it can be in points. Now I'll say save. Now I'll select salary, right click, and I'll apply check constraints. I can add a check constraint, and expression I can say salary should be greater than 0. Close this. I'll say save all. Save. So we have seen all the things. We have seen creating database, table, columns, primary key, identity column, default values, unique key, check constraints. So almost all the things. Now I want to add records to this table. So that is your employee table. Right click and say edit top 200 rows. Select the table, right click and say edit top 200 rows. Now I can start adding the values. Now you see this. Employee ID is disabled in disable mode, that is null. Employee name I can give Ahmed, email ahmed@gmail.com. Gender I'll leave it as is. Salary I'll give minus 789. So it says that the insert statement conflicted with the check constraint. The conflict occurred in this. So there is some check constraint on salary. So it cannot be negative. I'll say 7,000 should take. Now let me execute this. There is a red mark, means it has not inserted the record here. So I'll execute. Now you see this, I got employee ID as 2, Ahmed, email address, gender by default M, and salary 7,000. Now you might have got a question that employee ID it should start from 1. Why 2? Because it encountered an error at the time of insert. That is check constraint. So it has initialized the value 1 and it tried to insert, then it was an error. At second time it will increment the value and insert. So it will not worry about whether the record has got inserted or not, all those things. So this is the initial problem. So that is the reason we never put employee ID as prime auto increment or identity column. Now I'll go for another record. Peter@gmail.com, mail, and let the salary be 6,000. Lily, I'll leave email as null, or I'll just try to repeat the email. So let us see that. Okay. Peter@gmail.com, say 5,000. Now there is an error, you see this. Cannot insert duplicate values because of unique email on employee. So employee email is unique, so it cannot be Peter. Can it be null? Caps, null. The changes value cannot be null. Why? Because it cannot be null. Why? Because at the time of designing the database, we said that email ID cannot be null. So this constraint is applying on that unique. Now if I say allow null, if I say save, I should execute it once again. I'll close this. Now you see this. Null. Now you get a record. Email is null. Gender, that's fine. Now if I insert one more record with null as this, and this is mail and salary 5,000. Now it will throw an exception. You cannot have multiple null values because it is unique. So we have seen creating database, creating table, primary key, identity column, set default values, creating unique key, creating check constraint, if you want to see the log file, what all we have done. So this is the function that we need to call. Anyway, it is not much important, just for our information. I should say select star from. So till now we have performed so many operations that it has created 2495 records in the log file. Operations, you can see that inserted rows. So a lot of things that it is performing. So it is tracking a lot of things. Modified the rows, commented, that means committed, that means we have made the save changes, all these things. So anyway, we need not to worry much about the log file. Actually, in some interview they may ask, how do I read log file? So use fn_db log. So this is basically you need to answer, but it has nothing to do with your real-time projects. Maybe it might be helpful for your admins or database administrator, those who want to recover something from the log. That's it for today.